were the only people her mother allowed in the house that morning, except for Mr. Krebs, the widower from next door, who, although almost 80, kept the reporters at bay like a loyal palace guard, screened telephone calls, and took messages. An autopsy had been done only hours after what everyone kept calling the accident, but Chief Zielinski would not reveal the findings, explaining that giving out any information would interfere with the investigation. Jenna stubbornly refused to accept that this was just some accident. This was a murder. Her father was dead, and somebody was going to have to pay for it. She slid her hands under her thighs to warm her fingers. The room was ice cold. Her mother always kept the central air conditioning running. Jenna hated having the house all closed up in the summer. She looked over at Dave Zielinski, who sat in the chair next to her. He was a middle-aged man with a robust, ruddy face and wire-rimmed glasses that seemed to be constantly sliding down his nose, no matter how many times he pushed them back in place. Under different circumstances, she would have found this funny. "I know this is difficult for you, Mrs. Ward," he told Jenna's mother, looking slightly embarrassed, "but I need you to tell me everything that happened yesterday." Jenna glanced across the room to where her mother sat on the couch, looking calm and composed. Meredith Ward had changed from her shorts into a sleeveless sundress. The sheer fabric with tiny pastel flowers fell in soft folds about her ankles. Jenna's hand went instinctively to the side of her head. She suddenly remembered that she still had not combed her hair. Her mother was watching her. She attempted to give her daughter a reassuring nod, but Jenna pretended not to notice. She scarcely listened as Chief Zielinski began asking her mother questions. When he finally turned to Jenna, she slowly and methodically related what she could remember from that day. Images flooded her mind, images of her father lying at her feet, of the staple gun still on the roof where he had dropped it, glinting in the sharp noonday sun, of her mother running from the house, drawn by her daughter's unbearable screams, running toward her, balancing a plate with a tuna fish sandwich, unaware that she had it in her hand. But these were the only images that came to mind. The rest of the morning was a blank. "Can you remember anything else?" Chief Zielinski asked. He raised his eyebrows, and as he did, his glasses once again slid down his nose. This time he took them off and slipped them into his shirt pocket. "I know it's hard, but—" "How would you know?" Jenna said. She wasn't trying to be rude. She simply hated it when people assumed they knew what she was feeling, especially now, when it bothered her that she really wasn't feeling that much of anything at all. Chief Zielinski stared at Jenna as if he thought she was intentionally trying to impede his investigation. But he said nothing. Instead, he began to drone on about how the local ballistics team didn't have the knowledge or the equipment to figure the trajectory of the bullet. So they were going to turn it over to the experts, engineers from Picatinny Arsenal, who could figure the coordinates on their computer. They could, according to Chief Zielinski, determine the arc of the bullet from the point of impact all the way back to where the gun had been fired. But, he explained, looking apologetic, the men from Picatinny were in the middle of another project and wouldn't be available for a while. "A while?" Meredith Ward asked. "What does that mean? 2 days? 2 years?" Her mother's voice, usually even and controlled, wavered slightly. Jenna studied her mother closely, watching for other signs that there might be a crack in her professional veneer. Meredith Ward was an account executive for a large New York advertising agency. She was not a person to be kept waiting. Jenna knew this from experience. She had seen her mother hang up the phone dozens of times just because someone had dared to put her on hold. To hear her mother's voice quake, even slightly, was disturbing. Dave Zielinski shifted uneasily in his chair and ran his palm across his thinning hair. "Hard to say. These guys can be unpredictable." Jenna rose abruptly. She stared down at the police chief. "So was the lunatic who shot my father." "It's okay." Meredith Ward crossed the room and put an arm around her daughter's shoulder. Jenna pulled away from her. "What's okay?" She narrowed her eyes at her mother. "What are you talking about? Nothing's okay. Nothing will ever be okay again." Each time she emphasized the word okay, she sounded as if she were trying to take a bite out of it. Her mother shook her head. "I was talking about the investigation," she said, ignoring Jenna's outburst. "I meant sometimes these things take time, even if we would like them to go a lot faster. Her mother's composure only infuriated Jenna all the more. "Well, I can tell you this, anyway," Chief Zielinski said, looking relieved that he could offer them something. "One of their guys will be out here tomorrow to start collecting information from the site. They'll probably want to go over the police report then, too." Meredith Ward began to massage the space between her eyebrows with her thumb and forefinger. She looked over at Jenna. She seemed to be waiting for something. Jenna thought that if she stayed in the room another minute, she would suffocate. All she wanted to do was get out of there. Without another word, she headed for the front foyer. She would take a walk, and when she came back, everything would magically be just as it had been before the accident. Her father would be there, and Chief Zielinski, and this whole horrible nightmare would have disappeared. But when she opened the front door, she found herself right in the line of fire, assaulted on all sides by a barrage of reporters and photographers. Too shocked by the intrusion to react, she merely pulled back into the foyer like a turtle seeking the safety of its shell. Then she sat down on the stairs, folded her head into her lap, and waited for the tears that would not come.